What if what you call a delay is actually the time God is using to prepare you? Maybe that question already stirred something inside you, because deep down you've been feeling behind. Life seems to have moved forward for everyone else except you. You look around and see people advancing, achieving, reaching places you once dreamed of reaching too. And then comes that quiet wait. Hard to explain, but very easy to feel. The sense that you should already be somewhere else, that something should have worked out by now. That feeling doesn't usually make noise. It shows up at night, when everything gets quiet, when you lay your head on the pillow and start reviewing your life as if flipping through a book that didn't turn out the way you expected. You wonder where you went wrong, if you wasted too much time, if you missed opportunities, if somehow you failed. And the most exhausting part isn't even the doubt, it's the comparison. It's looking around and feeling like everyone else got the life manual, except you. Like there's a right pace, an invisible timeline, and you fell behind it. That eats away at you. It creates urgency. It creates guilt. It leads to decisions made out of desperation to make up for lost time. But let me invite you to breathe for a moment, just a little. Because maybe the problem isn't you. Maybe it's the way we learn to see time. Human beings measure life in dates, ages, deadlines, and achievements. We turn existence into a stopwatch. But purpose doesn't work like that. It never has. When spirituality enters this conversation, something starts to shift. Not in a mystical or distant way, but in a real, grounded way. There is a difference between our time and God's time. While we rush, He builds. While we hurry, He prepares. And preparation is almost never visible. Jesus Christ is a clear example of this. He never rushed. He never hurried to prove anything to anyone. He spent years in obscurity, lived a simple, quiet life. To human eyes, it might have looked like delay. But when the moment came, everything happened at exactly the right time. Not before, not after. Maybe you're living something similar right now. A season that looks still on the outside, but is deeply active on the inside. A time when almost no one applauds. A time when you start questioning more, feeling more, noticing things you used to overlook. What if the discomfort you feel isn't a sign of failure, but of transformation? Throughout this video, I want to walk with you through this idea slowly, without rushing, because if you allow it, by the end, you may see your own story differently. Not as someone who arrived too late, but as someone being prepared for something greater than they can imagine right now. But to understand that, we first need to talk about a lie we learned to believe. There is a lie that almost all of us absorb without realizing it. It's never written anywhere, but it's repeated constantly in conversations, in expectations, in silent judgments. The lie of the right timing. From an early age, society teaches us that life follows a fixed schedule, that there's a right age to achieve things, an ideal moment to make it. An invisible deadline that, once crossed, becomes a source of quiet shame. This clock doesn't sit on your wrist, but it weighs heavily on your conscience. The problem is that this clock wasn't created to care for you. It was created to compare, to measure people as if they were identical projects, as if everyone started from the same place, with the same wounds, the same opportunities, the same inner resources. Philosophy warned us about this long ago. When life is lived like a race, it stops being lived as an experience. Hurry steals meaning, comparison steals identity, and little by little, we start believing that value only exists when there's visible success. Social media deepened this lie. It doesn't show process, it shows display windows. It shows happy endings without the behind the scenes, achievements without sleepless nights. You see someone arriving, but you don't see how long they wandered before finding their way. And even when you know this logically, emotionally the comparison still happens. That's where anxiety is born. Not because you want more, but because you think you're falling behind. And when someone believes they're behind, they start running. And running almost always leads to bad decisions. In spirituality, time was never treated as an enemy. Humans measure time. God works with purpose. While we ask when, God asks for what. That difference changes everything. Jesus teaches us something profound here again. He could have started his ministry much earlier. He could have impressed people sooner. He could have followed human expectations. But he didn't. He began his public mission around the age of 30, an age when many people already feel behind. Why does that matter? Because it shows that the right time isn't the time of comparison. It's the time of alignment. It's when who you are on the inside can sustain what you're about to live on the outside. So here's an honest question. Who decided what it means to be behind? Was it you? Or was it a standard you accepted without questioning? This lie of the right timing creates three dangerous things. Guilt, because you start judging yourself. Urgency, because you feel like you need to compensate. And bad decisions, because you act to prove something, not because you're ready. Maybe you walked paths that weren't yours just to avoid looking stuck. Maybe you accepted less than you deserve because you were afraid to wait. Maybe you drifted away from who you truly are just to fit into a deadline that never made sense to your soul. And here's a truth that may ease your heart. Maybe you're not failing. Maybe you're growing in silence. True growth is rarely comfortable. It dismantles old versions of you. It asks hard questions. It removes easy certainties. And from the outside, it looks like stagnation. But on the inside, it's construction. The problem is that we were trained to confuse noise with progress, movement with advancement, and silence with abandonment. When in reality, silence is often where foundations are strengthened. If you feel that something is being worked out inside you, even without clear results yet, that isn't delay, it's maturation. It's the time when you learn to sustain what you want to live, and this is where almost everyone gets it wrong. They confuse silence with abandonment. There's something deeply uncomfortable about silence. We've been conditioned to associate answers with noise, signs with movement, presence with immediate confirmation. When nothing happens on the outside, the first conclusion is usually harsh. God stepped away. I was forgotten. Something went wrong, but God's silence has never been absence. It has always been invisible work. If you look closely at the deepest spiritual stories, you'll notice a pattern. The most decisive moments almost always happen away from the spotlight. Jesus went through the desert before beginning anything visible. David was anointed king long before sitting on the throne. Years passed. Silence. Waiting. Process. None of that was punishment. It was preparation. There's a kind of growth that can't be displayed. It happens inside, in character. In how you react when no one is watching, in how you deal with small frustrations, in the emotional maturity that's built while the world seems still. We live in a culture that only recognizes value when there's external success, when it can be shown, when it becomes a success story. But a human being isn't sustained only by achievements. They're sustained by inner structure, and that takes time. Not all progress makes noise. Let that stay with you, because it changes how you interpret your own life. Not every step forward comes with applause. Not every transformation comes with an announcement. Sometimes the greatest progress is that you didn't give up, that you learned to say no, that you developed discernment, that you stopped abandoning yourself to meet expectations. Not all progress makes noise. Silence can be the place where your identity is strengthened, where your faith stops being borrowed and becomes personal, where you begin to understand your limits, your shadows, your true motivations. Jesus never rushed to meet human expectations. When people tried to hurry him, he withdrew. When they demanded signs, he stayed silent. Not because he couldn't act, but because he knew that acting outside the right time creates consequences that cost deeply. Hurry creates shortcuts, and shortcuts almost always charge a high price later. They may seem to work at first, but they require you to sacrifice important parts of yourself to keep going. God's timing doesn't work like that. He doesn't accelerate to impress. He prepares so you can sustain. There's a profound difference between waiting and stagnating. Waiting is being attentive, growing inside, continuing to move internally, even when the external situation doesn't change. Stagnation is hiding, using time as an excuse to avoid facing fears. And here's a delicate point. How do you discern when you're being prepared and when you're simply afraid to move forward? That discernment doesn't come from outside. It comes from honest questions. Have you been using this time to know yourself better, to strengthen your awareness, to align your choices with what truly matters? Or have you been using silence just to postpone decisions? Not all progress makes noise, but all progress leaves internal signs. Soon, I'll show you a clear sign, one that almost no one talks about, that reveals whether you're being prepared or simply losing time. Before that, hold on to this. Silence is not the end of the story. Many times, it's the chapter where everything starts to make sense. But there's something even more important, something that reveals whether you're truly behind or not. There's a fundamental difference between the time we live and the time that actually transforms. Human time is measured in clocks, calendars, deadlines. It runs, pushes, pressures. It's the time that makes you feel like you're always owing something to life. God's time works differently. It doesn't rush. It unfolds. In philosophy and spirituality, this becomes clear when we talk about two kinds of time. One is the time of quantity. The other is the time of meaning. One counts days. The other reveals moments. One passes. The other marks you. Human time asks how much longer. God's time asks what needs to be formed. Jesus lived fully aligned with this deeper time. He wasn't driven by anxiety. He didn't react to pressure. When he seemed late, he was exactly on time. Even when it contradicted human expectations, he remained steady. Because acting outside the right time can create problems that last a lifetime. God doesn't work with anxiety. Anxiety comes from the fear of losing something. And those who trust don't live afraid of losing what hasn't even arrived yet. Apparent delay often prevents permanent mistakes. It avoids shallow bonds, immature decisions, paths that look right but cost too much later. Here's an honest reflection. Do you feel like you're wasting time or gaining awareness? There's a huge difference between wasted time and time spent maturing. One drains you, the other strengthens you. Sometimes God doesn't change the situation. He changes you. And when you change, the situation starts to make sense. What once felt like delay begins to feel like protection. What once hurt begins to teach. This kind of time requires trust, not blind trust, but trust built by observing your own story. How many times did something not happen when you wanted it to, and later you realized it was better that way? Maybe today you still can't see it, and that's okay. God's timing doesn't demand that you understand everything now. It only invites you not to panic, not to hurt yourself trying to force a rhythm that doesn't fit your soul. And if you allow it, a practical revelation begins to emerge, a subtle detail, almost imperceptible, but extremely important, something that clearly indicates that you're not behind, you're being prepared. And now, let me show you something almost no one notices. There are signs that rarely appear in life's display windows. They don't come as achievements, titles, or external recognition. They show up inside. And interestingly, those are exactly the signs that indicate you're not behind. One of them is inner restlessness. Not the anxiety that paralyzes, but a discomfort that makes you think. A sense that life needs to mean more than just repeating the same days. When that appears, it's not failure. It's awakening. Truly lost people are usually far too comfortable. Another sign is discomfort with your current life. You look at what you have, what you do, the routine you live, and something no longer fits. That's not ingratitude, it's growth. When you mature, what once served you starts to feel small, and that hurts, but it also points direction. There's also the search for meaning. You start asking deeper questions. Not just, how can I earn more, or how can I get there faster, but why am I doing this, and who am I becoming along the way? These questions don't come from people who are behind. They come from people who are ready for something more conscious. Here's the part almost no one talks about. When these signs appear, life stops being about running and becomes about aligning. You don't need to speed up. You need to listen. Because ignoring these signs, now that can delay a whole life. If you recognize even one of these signs in yourself, then it completely changes how you should see your life from now on. Not as someone who failed timing, but as someone being called to live with more truth. There is something that truly has the power to delay a life, and it's not lack of talent. It's not lack of opportunity. It's not even time itself. What delays a life is usually something more subtle. Fear disguised as caution. We learn to call fear prudence, planning, waiting for the perfect moment. But deep down, it's often just fear of failing, fear of being seen, fear of discovering that we're not as good as we'd like to believe. Waiting too long to begin is a quiet way of giving up without admitting it. Time passes, ideas grow old, and the person keeps preparing for a day that never comes. Not because God asked them to wait, but because fear took control. Comparison also paralyzes. When you measure your journey by someone else's life, every step feels too small. And so you don't move. You get stuck between the desire to advance and the fear of not being enough. Jesus never called ready people. He called willing people, people with doubts, with flaws, with messy stories. The invitation was never come when you're perfect. It was come as you are. God doesn't wait for perfection. He waits for willingness. There's a difference between acting with awareness and acting with haste. One is taking attentive steps. The other is standing still, waiting for all risks to disappear. That never happens. Growth involves risk. Change involves discomfort. Trust involves letting go of total control. Maybe what's missing isn't more time. Maybe it's calm courage, the kind of courage that doesn't shout or show off, but moves even with fear, one step at a time. No spectacle, no comparison. If there's one thing you can take from this today, it's this. Don't confuse God's timing with your fear of moving forward. One is preparation, the other is a prison, and when that difference becomes clear, something starts to reorganize inside you. Guilt softens, urgency loses its grip, and action becomes more genuine. And if there's one thing you need to carry with you today, it's this. Type OK to continue. You made it this far, and that alone says a lot about you. Someone who's truly behind doesn't ask these questions, doesn't seek meaning, doesn't stop to reflect. The fact that you're listening to this right now reveals that something is being prepared inside you. You are not behind, you are being prepared. Maybe your story didn't follow the script you imagined. Maybe some dreams were left along the way. Maybe you experienced more pauses than visible progress. But pauses are not empty. They are spaces where something is being organized within. Jesus is living proof that the right time always comes. He didn't rush processes. He didn't shorten paths. And when the moment arrived, everything was fulfilled with precision. The world may have thought it was late, but purpose never misses God's timing. Your life hasn't failed either. It's under construction, and true construction takes time. It requires adjustments. It requires internal revisions that no one sees, but that support everything that comes next. Maybe years from now, you'll look back at this exact moment and realize this is where everything began. Not with a big external achievement, but with a quiet shift in perception. The day you stopped accusing yourself and started understanding yourself. If this message spoke to you, walk with us. Subscribe to the channel, not as a casual click, but as a commitment to keep reflecting, growing, and aligning your life with greater awareness. If you want, share in the comments. Have you ever felt behind in life? Sometimes writing is the first step to organizing what's inside, and if someone came to mind while you were listening to this, share this video with them. They might need these words today. God's timing never fails, even when our hearts feel like it's already too late.